In what follows, we shall try to think about dwelling and building. This thinking about building does not presume to discover architectural ideas, but alone to give rules for building. This venture in thought does not view building as an art or as a technique of construction. Rather, it traces building back into that domain to which everything that is belongs. We ask, 1. What is it to dwell? 2. How does building belong to dwelling? We attain to dwelling, so it seems, only by means of building. The latter, building, has the former, dwelling, as its goal. Still, not every building is a dwelling. Bridges and hangars, stadiums, and power stations are buildings, but not dwellings. Railway stations and highways, dams, and market halls are built, but they are not dwelling places. Even so, these buildings are in the domain of our dwelling. That domain extends over these buildings and yet is not limited to the dwelling place. The truck driver is at home on the highway, but he does not have his shelter there. The working woman is at home in the spinning mill, but does not have her dwelling place there. The chief engineer is at home in the power station, but he does not dwell there. These buildings house man. He inhabits them and yet does not dwell in them, when to dwell means merely that we take shelter in them. In today's housing shortage, even this much is reassuring and to the good. Residential buildings do indeed provide shelter. Today's houses may even be well-planned, easy to keep, attractively cheap, open to air, light, and sun. But do the houses in themselves hold any guarantee that dwelling occurs in them? Yet those buildings that are not dwelling places remain in turn determined by dwelling insofar as they serve man's dwelling. Thus dwelling would in any case be the end that presides over all building. Dwelling and building are related as end and means. However, as long as this is all we have in mind, we take dwelling and building as two separate activities, an idea that has something correct in it. Yet at the same time, by the means and schema, we block our view of the essential relations. For building is not merely a means and a way toward dwelling. To build is in itself already to dwell. Who tells us this? Who gives us a standard at all by which we can take the measure of the nature of dwelling and building? It is language that tells us about the nature of a thing, provided that we respect language's own nature. In the meantime, to be sure, there rages round the earth an unbridled yet clever talking, writing, and broadcasting of spoken words. Man acts as though he were the shaper and master of language, while in fact language remains the master of man. Perhaps it is before all else man's subversion of this relation of dominance that drives his nature into alienation. That we retain a concern for care in speaking is all to the good, but it is of no help to us as long as language still serves us, even then, only as a means of expression. Among all the appeals that we human beings on our part can help to be voiced, language is the highest and everywhere the first. Hello, I'm going to try to explain this in a little bit more detail because some of the sentences are difficult to understand and it was translated from German into English, so it's not in its original language. The first point that I thought is important to dwell on, and a point that is instructive, is the statement, "The truck driver is at home on the highway." This statement alone can help change the way you think. So when you are being at home, you're staying there. Home is a place where you feel at peace, where it is safe, where you can stay. So this statement, the truck driver is at home on the highway, it doesn't mean that he's like in his kitchen making his food, or like he's got his sofa and he's watching TV. I mean, yes, these are things that are comforting, and typically we do have them at home. But the truck driver does have maybe a small microwave. He has snacks. He has his radio, and he's used to being there. He has spent time out on the highway, so he knows how to take care of himself and the things that might happen along the way. And this is a little bit why he's at home. You know, he might know good exits to take for bathroom or for restaurant or whatever. I'm not a truck driver, so I don't know the ins and the outs of it. But he's comfortable there. I think it's not like when we go into a car and we have to spend 2 hours on a trip. We're not at home on the highway. It's very uncomfortable because, at least for myself, I'm only thinking about the place that I'm trying to go to. I'm not trying to stay on the highway. That's not a place where I want to be. But for the truck driver, that is a place where he be, or where he is, if you want to conjugate the verb correctly. That is the place where he is, where he makes his money, his livelihood. And for the moment, it might not seem like a pleasant place. You know, maybe not everybody would want to be a truck driver, but the truth is, the reality is that the way our world is constructed right now, that is, that's a position that needs to be filled for the moment. If we get AI driving the trucks, then we won't need the truck drivers anymore. Continuing on. Okay, building and dwelling are not two separate activities. This one really needs to be hammered into people's skulls because I find a lot of people think in very simplistic kind of cause and effect. And that's something you want to avoid if you want to kind of upgrade your thinking capabilities. It's not as if first you build and then you dwell. For example, you spend a year building a house, and then you're like, okay, I'm done. I spent a year building. Now I'm going to go into the house and I'm going to just dwell there. That doesn't make sense at all, because what would dwelling be then? It would be virtual inactivity. It would just be sitting on the couch watching TV. That's not dwelling. Dwelling is building. If you're really dwelling and you're staying in a place wherever it is, it could be in Germany in the Black Forest, or you could be in a desert somewhere, or you could be on the side of the highway, like homeless, just kind of walking around. No matter where you are staying as a human being on the earth, and that already is to dwell. And when we recognize that we are here, I think that's when we're like, oh man, I should make some shelter, right? And the reason why we have this shelter isn't just to protect us from the rain or the cold. Yes, those are important reasons. I think it's much deeper than that. I think it's because as human beings, we wouldn't be fully human if we didn't build. We would be something else. I'm not sure what we would be. Like, we have to do it. It's in our nature as humans to put things together, whether it's a house, that you're making out of bricks, or it's like creating another human being with another human, or if it's just talking, like using language to talk to each other, because that also is a kind of building, like a building of sentences and a building of ideas. And unfortunately, a lot of the time when people talk, they're just talking absolute nonsense. Like, they're not really building what they should be building. They're not saying what they should be saying because their spirit is not dwelling in their word. There is no truth in what they're saying. So this kind of segues into language, which is the next point. Cool. So the point here is we are not in control of language. It's the other way around. Language controls us. I think people might be more comfortable with this, although you have to be very humble about it, because I think a lot of people think that they come up with ideas and then they get really proud about their ideas. But most ideas, especially the political ones, you don't really own them. It's more like they own you. Which is kind of sad, and it's humbling. And it changes the way that you relate to language, or it ought to change the way that you relate to language. That it's not like language has its own kind of separate being apart from us. And not only is it apart from us, it is higher. It's higher because it determines who we are, not the other way around. You can't just go out there and start making up your own words. Nobody's going to accept that. Sometimes you can get away with it, but most of our grammar and our words they've been around for so long that once you start making ungrammatical sentences or you try to make new words, it kind of exposes how fruitless that is. Like, you have to build on something, right? And we build on being, because there is being, there are things, and we react to that by speaking. It's not the other way around. We can't speak things into existence. I can't say things and then make them happen. This is a problem now in our, like, quote-unquote postmodern worldview, where there's women who think that they can change into men and men who think that they can change into women. And they think that they can just use technology to change these kinds of things. And it's true. You can use hormone therapy to kind of change the outward appearance of a being, of the flesh. But it goes further than that. These same people, they also want to start controlling language and controlling what you say. And so but that's not right. That's not right at all. People have to have free speech and freedom of conscience to say what they think is. I don't know. I feel like I just went way off into the weeds there. But it kind of shows you how in recent years, and I mean in the past 50 years, people have been getting too overconfident in what they can say, and they think they can just make things up and that it will be. But that's not true. I'm just going to stop there.